Okay class, our topic for today is all about instructional planning cycle. But before we start our lesson, let us have first our learning objectives. Objectives. In this lesson, you will be able to identify the instructional planning cycle, explain how the planning cycle plays in the planning for instruction, and explore implementation techniques at each stage of the cycle. In the previous lesson, we learned about instructional planning and its components. As you may have guessed, planning for classroom instruction needs to consider several factors for it to become more effective. It has to be well thought of and crafted. But how do we then go about in this planning process? What should teachers be thinking about in the planning process? So in this lesson, we shall be looking into the instructional planning cycle and how the planning process could help guide teachers in developing their lessons. So it is important to know the instructional planning cycle for us to understand the flow of the lesson, so listen carefully. So as you can see the cycle, there is a learning objectives, assessment strategies, instructional activities, and reflection. So that is an instructional planning cycle. So it is focused on how teacher will plan for their instruction. It is a process of planning instruction, delivering instruction, assessing learning, and reflecting on teaching continuously repeats. So that's a cycle. So why there is an instructional planning cycle? The purpose of this is to ensure that the teachers are adequately prepared to meet the educational goals of all students. See, for instance, if you were going to teach some pupils or students someday, instructional planning cycle is one of your guide for you to make sure that your students will meet your expectations or goals. And the process of instructional planning cycle is to be discussed by Miss Ayaton.
Good day everyone. For the continuation of the report of Ms. Zanzo, my name is Kirsten Ms. Ayaton and I will be the one to discuss you the 4 instructional planning cycle. So the 4 instructional planning cycle, first is the learning objectives, second is the assessment strategies, and third is the instructional activities, and fourth is the reflection. So the process is adapted from the Understanding by Design framework by Wigan and McTighe, 2005, employing the background design framework, the process of enumerating the steps in planning of the classroom instruction. So this instructional planning cycle was adopted from the Understanding framework of Wigan and McTighe, 2005, and this instructional planning cycle was applying in the classroom instruction. Learning objectives. At this stage, the teacher is compelled to ask, what should I teach my learners? So this can be the skills, knowledge, or values found in the curriculum document. So this can also be the big concepts or ideas that need to be learned or mastered by the learners. So it is heard that the teacher decides the content of the lesson. So in the learning objectives is where the teacher starts his or her concepts or topic. He or she going to make an objectives because objectives identify what the learner will know and be able to do by the end of the topic or lesson. So for example, in the making of learning objectives, you must need to apply the 3 domains, which are affective domain, cognitive domain, and psychomotor domain. So when we say learning objectives, it is where the teacher set goal to his or her students. At the end of the lessons, the learners or pupils should meet the objectives where the teacher set for them. Assessment strategies. After the teacher decides on the objectives, he or she now needs to identify how can the learners demonstrate their understanding and or achievement of the learning objectives. This is in the form of assessment strategies that the teachers need to use for the lesson. Key questions that can the teachers need to ponder here are how do I know that my learners have achieved the objectives of the lesson? And what will be the acceptable pieces of evidence of my learners' proficiency and understanding? This shall be provided the pieces of evidence that the teachers need to gauge whether the learners will be able to absorb the lesson. When we say assessment strategy, it is where the teachers making a strategy to identify the learners if the learners are really understood the topic or the learners are really met the goals of the teacher's strategy. Instructional activities. At this stage, the teacher now begins to think how about to teach his or her learners. Here, the teacher will now plan for the teaching strategies and learning activities that will be used in the classroom. With the objectives set and the assessment strategies in place, the teacher would now need to think about the learning experiences, information, and resources. Teachers would have to consider what enabling knowledge, skills, and values will the learners need to achieve the objectives. What activities will the learners need to do to equip themselves with this knowledge, skills, and values should be taught or coached, and what has best way to teach them, and what materials and resources are needed to best attend the objectives. When we say instructional activities, it is where the teacher initiates to conduct an activities to her learners, so that in that way the learners should participate and motivate to do the activity. Letting learners to do some good activities enhances their creativity, confidence, cognitive, and social well-being. Therefore, the teacher should be able to make his or her discussion enjoyable and fun. And the last is reflection. After the implementation of the instruction, the plan, the teacher then reflects about his or her teaching. At this stage, the teacher reviews what has happened at the implementation of the plan. This involved the reaction of assessment and the learners who struggled with the activities of assessment. The teacher can use the data from this observation to make adjustment and improve the next instructional plan. Reflection is very important because after the teacher teach his or her lesson, he or she needs to review or reflect of what has happened during his discussion, so that in that way, the teacher should assess that her or his discussion is really effective. Also, by doing this reflection, teacher will know of what part he or she needs to improve. Therefore, reflection is a review of where the teacher has done to her discussion.